Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at the ICAS Spring Symposium Libertas 2021. I'm Shinja Kim, President and Chair of ICAS. I welcome all of you to today's program with topics related to the Korean Peninsula and U.S. national security. It's my pleasure to host today's special guest speaker, Admiral Phillip Davidson. It's so good to see you again, Admiral. Welcome to the East Coast. Admiral Phil Davidson is the 25th Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, America's oldest and largest military combatant command based in Hawaii. USINDOPACOM is responsible for all U.S. military activities in the Indo-Pacific, covering 36 nations, 14 time zones, and more than 50% of the world population with over 3,000 languages. As a surface warfare officer, Phil deployed across the globe in frigate, destroyer cruisers, aircraft carriers. His sea service assignments include command for Korea Strike Groups, 8 Eisenhower Korea Strike Group, USS Gettysburg, and USS Taylor. In his previous assignment, Phil served as a commander, U.S. Fleet Forces Command, and Naval Forces U.S. Northern Command. He also served as Commander, U.S. 6th Fleet, and Commander, Naval Striking and Support Forces, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. As a native of St. Louis, Missouri, Admiral Davidson is a 1982 graduate of the United States Naval Academy with a degree in physics, and he's a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Naval War College with Master of Arts in National Security and Strategic Studies. So with that, we are happy to share with you this uncommon opportunity with Admiral Davidson, joined by many of our distinguished colleagues and ICAS fellows. Admiral Davidson, thank you for your service.
And aloha to everyone here. I appreciate the very kind introduction, and I'd like to thank ICAS for inviting me to speak today. I offer a warm welcome to the ICAS President and Chairman, Shinja Kim, as well as all of our distinguished guests in attendance. If I could, there's a little feedback. I think someone needs to mute their microphone. Thank you for moderating today's discussion in advance.
Thank you.
I hope to all of you that you and your families are remaining safe and in good health during these unprecedented times. It's a pleasure to actually join you virtually. I regret that I was unable to meet with you in person to discuss the strategic importance of our United States Republic of Korea alliance, not only on the peninsula, but to the entire Indo-Pacific region as well. I'd like to start by saying 1 month ago today, President Biden spoke with President Moon to stress the United States' commitment to strengthening the U.S. ROK alliance and described it as the linchpin for peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia. Similarly, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken affirmed the enduring strength and importance of the U.S. ROK alliance and highlighted the significance of continued trilateral United States and Republic of Korea Japan cooperation in a recent phone conversation with Foreign Minister Chun. And in one of his very first calls in office, Secretary of Defense Austin emphasized the importance of close cooperation between our two nations. In that same call with Defense Minister Suh, Secretary Austin underscored the U.S. commitment to defend the Republic of Korea through both the U.S. and ROK combined defense posture, as well as the U.S. extended deterrent. Indeed, the United States stands steadfast in our commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea, just as we did 70 years ago at the beginning of the Korean War. It is alongside our Republic of Korea allies that our U.S. service members stationed on the peninsula have a long history in upholding security and stability in the Indo-Pacific. For more than 6 decades, our ironclad alliance has been central to promoting peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, and it's certainly one of the most successful alliances of its kind in modern history. Throughout the years, our two nations have built a friendship that transcends the original agreement that was set forth in our Mutual Defense Agreement of 1953. That alliance between our two nations is a special bond built on mutual trust, shared values, and indeed that enduring friendship I just mentioned. It is our shared sacrifice and mutually agreed principles that underpin our alliance, ensuring we persevere together in the evolving geostrategic landscape. United States Forces Korea and our Republic of Korea counterparts remain ready to fight tonight to deter aggression, and our Indo-Pacific Command forces forward in the region are prepared to respond to any crisis on the peninsula. The strength and success of our alliance has resulted in a prosperous economic environment and an expanding trade relationship between our two countries. And over the past several decades, the Republic of Korea has achieved a remarkably high level of economic growth, and in 2019 was the United States' 6th largest trading partner. The United States, in turn, was the Republic of Korea's 2nd largest source of foreign direct investment in 2018 as well. The two countries, our two countries, reached $168 billion in trade in 2019 with very large scale flows, major flows of manufactured goods, agricultural products, and high technology goods as well. The Republic of Korea's foreign direct investment in the United States continues to grow and has more than tripled since 2011, from $19.7 billion to over $60 billion, $61.1 billion indeed in 2019. So it is without question that our U.S. and Republic of Korea alliance is highly dependent on our mutual economic prosperity and security. And indeed, that our economic prosperity and our security are inextricably linked in Northeast Asia and an example across the Indo-Pacific at large. Just the other day, U.S. National Security Advisor Sullivan spoke with his Republic of Korea counterpart. The two top advisors reaffirmed their commitment to coordinate closely on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the importance of maintaining peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. United States and Republic of Korea service members on the peninsula remain ready to address the North Korean regime's threats. Additionally, we are fully committed to United Nations Security Council resolution operations as part of the global effort to prevent ship-to-ship transfers of oil between North Korean and other vessels that are violating UN sanctions against North Korea. Until the nuclear situation is resolved on the Korean Peninsula and Kim Jong-un agrees to complete denuclearization, North Korea will remain our most immediate threat to peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Indeed, a nuclear-free North Korea benefits all nations in the region, and we are working allies and partners to denuclearize North Korea. Throughout the region, North Korea threatens its neighbors. It denies the freedoms and liberties that the international community upholds as the right of all individuals as well. And despite the relatively calm period over the past year or so, North Korea continues to develop its ballistic missile capability and could start a provocation cycle at any moment if KJU believed that North Korea would benefit. And while North Korea stands as our most immediate threat, China represents the greatest long-term strategic threat to security in the 21st century, not only in the Indo-Pacific, but to the entire globe. If I could comment for a minute on China. The Communist Party of China promotes a drastically different value system than our two nations. And they do so in terms of governance, trade, human rights, and intellectual property protections. China has a very pernicious approach to the region, and it includes a whole-of-party effort to corrupt, coerce, and co-opt government, businesses, organizations, indeed the people of the Indo-Pacific. Beijing's lawless practices throughout the region fuel widespread corruption in developing economies, and it has a devastating impact on regional security. We here in the United States are observing a shocking amount of corruption in the region, including under-the-table payments with government and business elites. China also uses a whole-of-government approach across the diplomatic sphere, the information sphere, the military sphere, and the economic sphere to coerce allies and partners around the globe as well. There are countless examples of the coercive ways in which China conducts business with governments and civilian entities to leverage agreements that largely benefit Beijing at the expense of others. One need look no further than the economic punishments against the Republic of Korea following the 2017 deployment of the THAAD missile defense system to understand the extent of China's coercion. From the auto industry to tourism to retail, China's campaign was devastatingly widespread. And that has been evidenced in other countries as well, including Australia, Canada, even Norway. Lastly, China is also co-opting international organizations to garner the support and influence necessary to reshape relationships and gain accesses in the region that are more favorable to the party's viewpoint and approach. Beijing has secured leadership spots at the helm of UN institutions that set global standards for air travel, telecommunications, and agriculture, to name just a few. The Communist Party of China seeks to sway the opinions of many global organizations so they adhere to the party's approach and terms. Meanwhile, an emboldened Communist Party of China seeks to exploit the current global pandemic environment with increased military aggression throughout the Indo-Pacific. The PLA's aggressive actions in the East and South China Seas and provocations throughout the region undermine the rules-based international order. This is all part of the Communist Party of China's campaign to supplant the established rules-based international order and replace it with a new order, one with Chinese characteristics, where Chinese national power would become more important than international law. And in my view, we must be doing everything possible to prevent China's corruption, coercion, and co-option from turning to conflict. Now, the alliance between our two nations, between the United States and the Republic of Korea, is fundamental to our combined ability to deter aggression and to uphold the established rules-based international order. Our two countries, our bilateral relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea should, and in my view, will continue to deepen moving forward. We are seeking every opportunity to bolster the alliance, not only to remain ready to fight tonight, so vital to the security and the security interests of both our nations. Our combined military training events are a principal method of ensuring our combined alliance readiness. Additionally, our collective modernization efforts ensure our forces are postured, positioned, and prepared for the future. U.S. Army Garrison Camp Humphreys, the U.S. Department of Defense's largest installation outside the continental United States, not only provides state-of-the-art facilities, it also helps allow for the transfer of valuable land to the Republic of Korea government for future development. The U.S. Department of Defense and the Republic of Korea Ministry of National Defense are investing in critical military capabilities to ensure our combined readiness to meet any threat to the alliance as well. We will continue to capitalize on purchases of advanced platforms and munitions, such as the F-35, the Global Hawk, the Maritime Patrol Aircraft P-8, and upgraded Patriot PAC-3 missiles to improve our combined interoperability and enhance our defense posture. We are also working to enhance our capabilities in space and cyberspace, along with efforts to counter weapons of mass destruction. Together, our two nations are improving our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capacity. We are developing robust missile defenses, fielding necessary command and control, acquiring critical munitions, and enhancing the tools to deter cyber attacks. We are also seeking new opportunities beyond our bilateral relationship for multilateral opportunities to engage with other like-minded nations in Northeast Asia and across the Indo-Pacific region. This includes searching for areas of agreement to encourage trilateral cooperation between the United States, the Republic of Korea, and Japan. We must not allow our past to imperil our future. We must focus on the future needs of our nations to best serve our people and our shared values. Indeed, the ever-increasing and dynamic security challenges in the Indo-Pacific, some of which I just described, demand our tactful cooperation in meeting them head-on. As President Moon stated just earlier this week, cooperation between Japan and South Korea would facilitate stability and common prosperity in Northeast Asia, as well as benefit the trilateral partnership between our three nations. Together, I believe we can make great advances in deterring North Korea by harnessing our collective strengths in maritime security, in information sharing, and in frequent dialogue between the United States, the Republic of Korea, and Japan. Further, our trilateral cooperation is the last thing that China wants to see. Indeed, it will go a long way in deterring communist aggression, assuring like-minded nations in the region, and advancing our three nations' security. Of course, our focus on multilateralism is much broader than Northeast Asia alone. We must continue to look elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific for opportunities to increase cooperation and advance partnerships. Both the Republic of Korea and the United States have key investments and interests across the whole of the region, including in promoting ASEAN as dialogue partners. The Republic of Korea's new Southern policy, Taiwan's new Southbound policy, and India's Look East policy all converge on ASEAN, which is central to our vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Coming together in the form of multilateralism is indeed a pillar of the rules-based international order, which has prevented conflict between great powers, deterred aggression from unstable regimes, and helped provide for unprecedented levels of prosperity and global stability. In closing, the United States Republic of Korea alliance is vital to keeping peace on the peninsula, as well as key to upholding the rules-based international order. Our alliance is strong, and our friendship is even stronger. Together, our two nations will continue to demonstrate our unwavering strength, our resolve, and our dedication to preserving peace throughout the Indo-Pacific region. Despite some of the threats that I think are manifest and the dynamic nature of the Indo-Pacific geopolitical situation, I am indeed optimistic about our future in the region. I'm optimistic about the future of the alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea. And I'm optimistic about the future of global security. And it's because of our shared values, our mutual trust, our commitment to one another, and the friendship that I've witnessed in my time in command here at INDOPACOM between our two nations. Kachi Kapshida. Indeed, I believe we will continue to go together. So may God bless the Republic of Korea, the United States of America, and may God bless the enduring alliance and cherished friendship between our two nations. I thank all of you for your time today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much for the privilege of speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Phillip. Now we're getting into the Q&A. First question. I will bundle three persons. Larry Nix, David Maxwell, and Bruce Bennett. Three of you raise one by one quickly, please.
Can you hear me
Sure.
now?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Admiral Davidson, my question has to do with something you said in your presentation, and that was about the widely reported ship-to-ship transfers of oil that take place throughout East Asian waters that go to North Korea. The UN Security Council's experts on enforcement of sanctions has a report that says that through these ship-to-ship transfers, North Korea is getting much more oil than the current UN sanction on oil allows. Now, amidst all of these reports, I have seen no reports about interdiction. So my question is, I guess, twofold. Number one, has there been interdiction of these ship-to-ship transfers? Secondly, what kind of North Korean provocations would trigger a U.S. decision to enforce this sanction by ordering the U.S. Navy to begin interdictions?
Thank you, Larry. David Maxwell? David? If not, Bruce Bennett, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm here. I got it. I got it. I thought we did answers first.
Right.
Admiral Davidson, thank you for your comprehensive overview. That was extremely informative. My question is short. One of the deficiencies of the OPCON transition process has been the lack of an information campaign to educate the Korean and American people about the importance of the transition. How would you explain to the American people and to the Korean people why the OPCON transition of the ROK-US Combined Forces Command is important to the security of the Republic of Korea and the national security interests of the U.S.? And thank you again.
David. Okay, Bruce Bennett, go ahead.
Thank you. Some of my military colleagues in Korea argue that a major reason for delaying OPCON transition and retaining a U.S. general as CFC commander is because there's information such as U.S. nuclear planning and force flow, which the United States has been reluctant to share with our ROK colleagues. Will that information be shared with the ROK commander of CFC after OPCON transition? so that he has unity of command and can properly prepare?
Thank you, Bruce. Sick hacker?
If I could
Go ahead.
interrupt here, could I stop the questions at this point? You're going to exceed my capacity to remember the nuance of them. Can I
Okay, go
address
ahead.
these 3 questions now?
Okay, fine. Phil, you have 3 questions.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the questions, all very good ones. So to the first question about ship-to-ship transfers of oil. In 2020, the ship-to-ship transfers of oil did exceed the authorized amount of imports that the UN recognized. The focus of not just the United States Navy, but indeed the joint forces of the United States, the Republic of Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, France, and the United Kingdom, all of which who have contributed ships, aircraft, and people to the Enforcement Coordination Center in Yokosuka, Japan, has been critically important. And the focus in 2020, due largely to COVID, was on disruption of ship-to-ship transfers as opposed to interdictions. The resiliency and response of the international community is critically important to helping cease ship-to-ship transfers. The network of bad actors that are delivering fuels, whether it's shippers, oil distribution companies, or ship captains, need to be held accountable by the international community in order to disrupt completely that flow. That said, if conditions warranted, could the international community come together on interdictions? That could be a potential in the future. To your second question about wartime operational control, that operational control transfer will occur when the mutually agreed upon conditions are fully met. A conditions-based basis for the transfer of operational control has been agreed to by our 2 nations, the United States and the Republic of Korea. Mutually agreed upon, and in my view, absolutely necessary to ensure the security of our 2 nations. To the last point, the key factors, the last question, I'm sorry, by the last questioner, with regards to OPCON control. The key needs to facilitate operational control are the capabilities required, predominantly in command and control and elsewhere, for the Republic of Korea to actually achieve the conditions that are warranted and agreed to between our 2 nations. Thanks for your questions. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Sick hacker?
Yes.
Tong Kim?
Thank you.
Yeah, Sick and Tong?
You can hear me, correct?
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Admiral Davidson, thank you so much for your reassurance, particularly. I have 2 quick questions. You made a very good case for the U.S. certainly can deter North Korea, and we have the extended deterrence for South Korea and Japan. I'm also concerned about dissuading North Korea, not to the point where it would actually trigger sufficient response from the U.S. that we need the extended nuclear deterrence, but something short of that. And so the question for that is, in the conventional military or defense business, what else does South Korea and the U.S. have to do to make sure that we can strengthen and dissuade North Korea? A second question, not unrelated, is rather than worrying about nuclear weapons, what about chemical weapons? And particularly, I'm working on some ideas as to how one might be able to get North Korea to join the Chemical Weapons Convention. But for that, I would need to better understand how serious a threat do the combined forces view the chemical weapons in North Korea? And then if you can address this also, how potent a force do the North Koreans see their chemical weapons? Thank you.
Thank you, Sick. Now, is Gil Roseman out there? Gil?
Can you hear me now?
If not, okay, Gil, go ahead.
Okay. I have a question about U.S. Efforts to get Japan and South Korea to cooperate more. In specific terms, how do we get, which of those two countries is more reluctant to join in the maritime efforts to create a stronger trilateral defense arrangement among the countries? Japan has been saying, well, until South Korea clears up the forced labor court cases, they are hesitant to act. And South Korea has been saying they are hesitant to do certain things that might offend the Chinese. So how is the U.S. managing this triangular arrangement?
All right, one more, Tong Kim.
Yes, thank you, Em,
Go ahead.
for doing this. My question has to do with missile defense systems that you mentioned in your presentation. What is your view of the left of launch strategy as far as the capability with either space sensor or cyber technology that you can use to detect, disrupt, and disable before enemy or North Koreans can launch their missiles to begin with, including the possible potential negative impact of the offensive nature of such a strategy?
Thank you, Tong. Admiral, it's all yours.
Okay. Seems like an episode of Firing Line. Thank you very much. All very, very robust and wonderful questions. So thank you for them. To the first questioner about the need to not only deter but dissuade North Korea and what capabilities are required to help in that dissuasion. First, I would say advancing our bilateral capabilities between our two nations. And I highlighted in my comments some of those capabilities, the F-35, for example. We have a history of integrated air and missile defense development when it comes to the Aegis weapon system, the Patriot weapon system, now with THAAD on the peninsula. I think that's also a key mechanism, as well as, deepening our relationships across the whole of the deepening our capabilities across the whole of our alliance in terms of offensive and defensive capabilities. I think they're going to be critically important. I would also submit that deepening our trilateral relationship with Japan helps on the dissuasion factor very, very much. To the second question there about chemical weapons, I won't go into great detail here. We are indeed concerned and plan for asymmetries in a fight that North Korea might present should the situation turn to conflict. And I would say, from a personal basis broadly, any effort to advance the CWC, I think, is worthy effort on the planet. And then lastly, to the questioner about Japanese and Republic of Korea, I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes here. Japanese and Republic of Korea maritime cooperation. I see deep cooperation in many respects. I mentioned the Enforcement Coordination Cell and the UNSCR enforcement efforts at the beginning of the discussion. We do cooperate trilaterally in missile defense exercises, and I've been quite encouraged by the response of our three nations to the provocations of Chinese bombers and Chinese and Russian co-bomber evolutions in the Sea of Japan and the Philippine Sea, the seamlessness in which our three nations can hand off the tracking and escorting of such threats in the region. So I think the opportunity is there to advance that trilateral relationship. And we, the United States, continue to support the Republic of Korea and Japan in advancing that trilateral relationship. And we have, it's just one more example, mechanisms like a trilateral information sharing agreement that helps facilitate that going forward. And the United States will do anything to help advance the bilateral relationship between those two nations. Back to you.
Thank you. Next one is Joe Bosco, Iris Shaw. Go ahead.
I think the Admiral forgot to answer my question. My question regarding the left of launch strategy and his views on it.
Okay. Phil, did you get his last question from Tonkin?
Yeah, I'm sorry for forgetting that. Thank you very much. Thanks for your question. Certainly the development of capabilities, the opportunity that non-kinetic potential that might be manifest in the cyber or the electromagnetic domains, bear development. I would say that there is potential there, globally, and in my own conversations with allies and partners around the world, I think many nations have that ambition to be able to see what the potential is when it comes to non-kinetic fires in the cyber domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Is Joe Bosco?
Yes.
Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Admiral? Can you hear me?
Joe and Iris and
Yep.
Yoshi
Okay.
Krose. All right.
Admiral, thank you for doing this. My question, you mentioned in your presentation the pernicious role that China plays in the region. My question has to do specifically with China's role vis-a-vis North Korea. We know that it has been subverting the sanctions against North Korea. President Trump mentioned it at his Hanoi press conference and said it was okay. My question is it time now to step up the secondary sanctions against China for what it's doing to subvert the sanctions against North Korea?
Thank you, Joe. Iris, go ahead.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you for your leadership. Taiwan truly welcomed the renewed PDI focus on boosting deterrence against China and appreciate the recent transits to the Taiwan Strait. Could you kindly share what you have observed on the ground on the tensions and trend lines for potential Taiwan Strait crisis, and what do you envision Taiwan could play a role in countering China's growing aggression, including the Gray Zone and info ops? Thank you.
Okay. Admiral, it's all yours.
Okay, to the first question about China's role, I'll tell you very forthrightly, and I mentioned it in my earlier answer. It's a responsibility of the international community to come together on the sanctions effort with North Korea, and China is one of those nations. This is an opportunity to produce an outcome on North Korea, a denuclearized North Korea that would enhance the security of all nations, not only in the region, but I would submit around the globe as well. So I think indeed there is a role for China to play in the sanctions enforcement effort. And indeed, China can be doing more. I'd like to go back to the questioner on the Taiwan Strait transit. Could you ask that question again? There was a little nuance at the very beginning that I missed.
Just in terms of the renewed focus on the Pacific Deterrence Initiative to boost deterrence against China, And in terms of what you have observed through transits and in the recent tensions and trend lines of the Chinese fighter jets harassing Taiwan's southwest space, is there a trend lines towards a potential Taiwan Strait crisis? And also keen to know that if, what would you envision Taiwan could play a role in countering China's growing aggression, including the gray zone and information operations? And, you know, maybe Taiwan is, of course, building up its asymmetrical ODC defense capabilities. Do you envision any other bilateral or trilateral exchanges that could be taking place?
Thank you, Iris. Okay,
Thank
Edmund.
you for the question. I appreciate you repeating that. Thank you very much. I take you said Taiwan Strait transit, I thought a couple of times, but I think you were talking about Taiwan Straits and the potential for a crisis there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry if I misheard, I apologize. You know, certainly I made note of China's pernicious approach, you know, really across all lines of effort, as we call them in the military, right? Diplomacy, information, military, and economically in the region. And it, you know, continues to challenge not only Taiwan, but several nations across the region. So just recent examples over the past few months in the South China Sea, for example, include increasing PLA exercises, including the firing of long-range ballistic missiles. They continue to ignore the 2016 arbitral tribunal ruling on the PRC's excessive maritime complaints. This includes operating bombers, fighters, maritime patrol aircraft, intelligence gathering aircraft in the South China Sea, as well as in the East China Sea. The PLA and the PRC is continuing to work bilateral code of conduct nations with several nations in ASEAN, other South China Sea claimant states, I should be specific about, to leverage their own dominant military and economic position with each state individually rather than pursuing collective solutions. PRC is using military and paramilitary assets to pressure other states from operations, sometimes in those other states' own exclusive economic zones. This includes hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation, fishing, mineral and other natural resources exploration, resupply missions to outposts in the Spratly Islands. Other pernicious Chinese habits in the region include ramming and sinking a Vietnamese vessel, pressuring the Malaysian exploration vessel West Capella within the Malaysian EEZ. The PRC is unilaterally renaming some 80 mostly underwater geographic features in the South China Sea in an attempt to legitimize claims. They've been imposing a unilateral fishing ban over large portions of the northern South China Sea, pushing Chinese fishing vessels south, further straining depleted resources in the oceans. They've implemented Operation Blue Sea, a multi-month environmental law campaign which authorized the Chinese Coast Guard and military to enforce PRC domestic law in international waters. And the PRC has seized over 700 foreign vessels for violating Chinese law. There was a new Coast Guard law that China put into effect on the 1st of February of this year, which allows the Chinese Coast Guard to enforce and expel by force, if necessary, foreign ships operating within China's claimed waters. So, you know, the aggressive nature of China's activities is not focused just on the Taiwan Strait, but indeed across the region. Now, to your point, what's happening along the Taiwan Strait? So China has significantly increased the number of military aircraft crossings into Taiwan's air defense identification zone, their ADIZ, as we know it in the military, since June of last year. They've increased the number of centerline, the de facto centerline median line crossings by military aircraft. PRC Foreign Ministry claimed on the 21st of September that there is no Taiwan Strait centerline, casting aside the unofficial but long recognized control measure and unilaterally changing the status quo. The PRC has increased intelligence collection using intelligence gathering ships and aircraft. And they've increased their shows of force in and around Taiwan, such as large air operations, circumnavigations in Taiwan by bombers and surface ships. They've expanded the media coverage, to your point, of PLA activities to emphasize capabilities and readiness to employ military force against Taiwan if necessary. And they've issued strident protests against interaction between Taiwan and the US, indeed, between Taiwan and countries around the world. In the US, I mean, just one example, they've included protesting the attendance of a US official attending a funeral in Taiwan. So you can see that the aggressive nature of these things, many of which I described are in the military sphere, but also described for you earlier what's happening, you know, around the world economically, diplomatically, how China is maneuvering to isolate, to do two things, either isolate Taiwan or to serve Chinese own interests when it comes to their own economic and political interests, you know, is a difficulty. I would submit that all nations in the region have an obligation in the information domain, to your question, you know, to shine a light on this bad behavior that PRC is putting forth, particularly when other nations in the region, other Pacific nations in the region, and indeed other international community operations in the region, you know, continue to do things to reinforce the freedom of navigation, freedom of communication that I like to say, you know, our ability to traverse the oceans in order to facilitate the connection between the Republic of Korea and the United States, for example, you know, to permit air travel, to allow, you know, the extraordinary undersea cable network that is in the South China Sea and East China Sea, the Philippine Sea, you know, for the trillions of dollars in financial information that moves through those cables to go. We are doing those things. None of those provocations that you've seen China doing is going on from the international community. So properly shining a light in the information domain in the media, I think, is the responsibility really of all free nations that are interested in the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Phil. Edmund, Trivet, and Yoshi Croce, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Edmund, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Kim, and Admiral Davidson for your thoughts. My two questions are related, and they deal with India. Under the last administration, the US and India reached a number of important defense foundational agreements. They worked together in the renewed Quad framework, and they achieved a number of milestones in military exercises and defense purchases. In recent months, Indian tensions along the border with China have brought them into closer alignment with the US. So there are signs of growing bilateral cooperation on defense. Nevertheless, some observers worry that India could be distracted from maritime cooperation because of security challenges on land, while others have asked whether or not India is capable of sufficiently investing in its own defense, citing the economic underpinnings of a strong national defense as being a little bit uncertain. So my question, how do you evaluate the state of the US-India security partnership in general and within the Quad framework specifically? And then the second question is, you look forward the next 4 years of the current administration, how would you venture to define what successful bilateral cooperation would look like towards a free and open Indo-Pacific? Thanks.
Thank you, Edmund.
Thanks for your question, sir. I appreciate that very much. I think the potential for a deepening partnership between the United States and India is the strategic opportunity for both our nations in the 21st century. I think you very accurately described the underpinnings of that deepening relationship over the course of the past couple of years. You then highlighted the maritime piece of it. I would say that certainly during my 3 years here in command, I have observed a deepening maritime cooperation effort in the region between our two nations. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One was India's participation in RIMPAC, the Rim of the Pacific exercise that was here in 2018. The Indian-led delegation just did an extraordinary job in both the import and the at-sea phases, demonstrating, extreme professionalism and just, wonderful enthusiasm for its participation in the Rim of the Pacific. And I have seen, subsequent to that timeframe, Indian operations in the South China Sea, in the South Pacific, that have, spoken, if not in word, but in deed, in understanding of the kind of values and principles that the free and open Indo-Pacific vision represents. And I would say Prime Minister Modi's Act East policy represents as well. So I think that's a good opportunity there. To the point about deepening the partnership going forward, defense investments and otherwise, I've been encouraged by the U.S. equipment that India buys. It allows a level of tactical development and encourages interoperability that common platforms actually encourage. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity there to continue to deepen the relationship. And some 70% of what India buys new is U.S. equipments when it comes to the defense industry, and I think that's a great opportunity. So to your point about the next 4 years, I think this is an area in which both our two nations would benefit in advancing the foundational underpinnings. You cited, information sharing agreements, the COMCASA, for example, a communications agreement, things like that. These are critically important. We need to continue to build that along the way. There are steps that we have to get signatures on in order to, give reality and life, to an exclamation of a deepening partnership. And we need to continue to work through that. I can tell you, in my own bilateral obligations, and I don't, push, all the way up to the policy level, across the dime in my interactions with my counterparts in India. We are deepening that relationship and, checking off some of the fundamentals, some of the signatures that we can sign, between myself and my counterpart, to advance our relationship. And I think that's, again, it's not just the 4 years. I think it's the opportunity of the century for our two nations. Thanks for the question.
Sure, thank you. Is Yoshi Kruse out there? If not, Sean Creamer and Richard White and Sunny Lee. Go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry. I'm only going to have time for one more question here. We're just about at the limits of my time here. So
okay.
Over to you to determine who gets to ask that question, please.
Sean, go fast.
All right, sir. You mentioned the THAAD system deployment to Korea several times. The ROC paid a huge political and economic cost imposed as retaliation by China after the stationing of that system here. Some of my Korean colleagues felt that the U.S. was too passive in helping the ROC counter the Chinese retaliation campaign. So how do we address this fear with allies and partners such as the ROC, in particular as the U.S. looks to increase its forward posture across the Indo-Pacific and deploy advanced systems currently in development?
Thank you. Richard White?
That's going to be it. Hey, thanks for the question very much. I appreciate that. Setting aside, the issue of whether they did or did not get enough support. I would say that, the focus should be on the Chinese pernicious response to the Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea-U.S. alliance, definition of what our defensive needs are. And that the activities that China actually undertook in the economic and diplomatic space is an effort to try to deter our two nations from providing for the mutual defense of our two countries. So the blame to be placed is on the PRC. Importantly, I think for the Republic of Korea, for the United States, indeed for all nations interested in a free and open Indo-Pacific, is to hang together on the mutual security, the enduring values, and the economic prosperity that our nations, those nations interested in a free and open Indo-Pacific, depend upon. And not to put up with the kind of pernicious activities, because the international community must respond to those. Not put up with the pernicious activities of China that are meant to deter us and dissuade us from cooperating and advancing the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Kang and Dr. Kim, and thank you for your time today very much. I appreciated the opportunity to interact with all of you, and I wish you all the very best in good health and for a better 2021. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Admiral. This is great, and we'll get back to you. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.